intro. Did I write anything on someone's paper that you've seen? I know you don't have time to go over the whole thing right now, that you have a question on. Does anybody have a problem with? You know what? You can always, because I realize you might not read through all my comments in class because we get started. Ask me another time or email me or call me. Say, why do we put commas here? I just was wondering. Just ask. It's fine. Yeah, Kyle.
Please ask me about this.
Oh. The semicolons and colons are irritating. And I know I keep mentioning these things and then you're like, I always seem to use it in the wrong place. I have said that colons can introduce a list. This is totally true. But it needs to come at the end of a complete thought. Let me show you the difference. Here's what Kyle wrote. The 3 reasons treason should be a capital punishment are: it will ruin lives, preventing further treason, and no other way to solve the problem. All right, so let me read that beginning. The 3 reasons treason should be a capital punishment are. 3 reasons are, and then you just write the 3 sentences. Here's a colon. There are 3 reasons why traitors should be executed. Colon. Boom, boom, boom. You see, I've listed it, and I've listed them after a complete thought. But you can't just stop in the middle of a sentence and put a colon, and that's what you did. And the reason I said ask me is because you're not the only one, Kyle. We're still kind of working on our, what do I do with a colon? What do I do with a semicolon? I want to use it, but I'm not quite sure how. Yes.
This was one of the most interesting papers that I've ever had to write.
Oh.
Because for me, my argument was that murder deserves capital punishment, not necessarily all treason. So it was no longer a yes or no
Yes.
question. I had to say that only treason.
Result of treason.
The specific result of
yes.
That treason. So I had to make that distinction, and I put it in my introduction to say not all treason deserves capital punishment. Only treason that kills innocent people should be called murder, and murder deserves capital punishment.
So any murder deserves capital punishment?
Yes.
Okay. So treasonous murder would be a subset of all murders that require it. Yes, Rhett.
I had a hard time, it took me way too long. I thought about it too much. There's part of me that's yes, these people need to die, but then I was also I don't know, that's the right answer. And I thought about it, and it got to the point where I was like, I need to start my paper now. I just gotta pick one. And so I don't really know, that's not really my entire opinion. And I didn't know, I know you had mentioned before that on some of the other opinion stuff that you wanted us to pick a side, so I was like, I'll just pick a side.
Yes.
I hope I thought it would be easier to find verses, Bible verses and stuff in the Bible against it and for it. And so
no, and Rhett makes a really good point. It's not, never be afraid that you're going to give me a paper and you've argued a side and I'm just going to think ill of you because I don't agree with that side. Or it's an exercise. It's an exercise to be thinking about issues. It's an exercise in learning to express yourself. I don't necessarily think that everything you guys argue for me is your deepest core belief, although sometimes it can be easier, to argue the thing. And I know you guys do debate and other things during your Wednesdays here. And so you're familiar with, oh crud, I've got to know that, I don't know, chocolate is the greatest food in the world.
Thinking that they were going to result in the lives of innocent people.
Well, that's their constant error. That's manslaughter. If you're causing something for the it shouldn't just be the intent, because that's why manslaughter is still a felony. Because if you don't think that you are going to kill the person, you still kill the person, and that loss is on their family, it's on them. They're gone. They're not in existence anymore. Right, but does it deserve death? Does manslaughter deserve death?
It depends. If it's reckless manslaughter, I think yes.
Mm.
If it's involuntary manslaughter, like you accidentally poison somebody. Or like you think about accidentally poison somebody, because let's say you're a better example would be like drunk driving.
Yeah.
That's
Wow.
That's manslaughter.
I feel like Matthew did this just so this would ensue.
Yeah, but like, do you think that like?
Hang on, Jonathan.
Oh, no.
Hang on. Don't forget.
If we say that like, so let's say that like the death penalty was available in all states. Would like you're talking if you didn't mean to kill them, you kind of think like drunk driving.
Hey guys, shh, let's listen to Rhett.
Crash into somebody, kill them. Like, does that deserve the death penalty? If that's what our that's very interesting. So personally, if you think about like drunk driving, you're causing yourself to be under the influence. One, and two, your doing process is altered. You're choosing to drive even though you may know that you are drunk, which you're also assuming that risk that you're going to kill yourself or kill others. And if that causes, I don't know, let's say hypothetically the death of a child and two parents, what is the cost there? You know, like that's 3 lives gone because
your choice. It could have been an accident that you killed them. They didn't go out intending to kill them.
Yeah,
They did,
but they
because
did.
of a wrong decision that they made.
Yeah.
Okay.
But as
Drink under the legal limit. Don't.
or not at all. So this is a highly debated. I'm not forgetting about you, Jonathan. I hope don't forget what you're going to say. It's highly debated subject. I don't know that. I mean, some people feel very strongly on one side or the other about the death penalty in general. But let's hear what you say, and then I have one more comment.
When I wrote, I took the side that treason deserves a death penalty, and like I thought about like including in my paper that I should like specify what kinds of treason, like not all treason deserves a death penalty, like Alex, but I didn't say it. So when like if you read my paper, I had in mind like treason where it costs people lives.
Yeah, which it often does, you know.
Is treason what Trump? Is treason what Trump's getting in trouble for, and Biden for them taking the documents home? Like, is that treason?
Yeah, I don't.
Should they get killed for that?
No, I don't know if that'd be treason. That's hard.
Yeah. I guess they're not committing a crime.
Yeah, Matthew, give us your.
I did not put this in my paper, and I don't know if I should have, but imagine somebody like I think what kind of depends on whether you should be put to death is how much, like how high ranking you are and how much you have betrayed. Because if you're like some random citizen and you tell China that Area 51 exists, they're not gonna, that's barely treachery. I mean, you're still trying to betray them, but it doesn't do anything. But if somebody like the vice president tells China that whatever is in Area 51 or whatever, big U.S. secret, that should probably be a death penalty.
But the humble private citizens might know things though that are dangerous. I'm sorry, John. Yeah. Okay, one more, Alex. Oh, you're okay. You're communicating with your brother. I love the fact that you guys thought about this, and it really is a very hot topic today because many states that still have the death penalty. There are people who are campaigning against it. I don't know either. Texas still has the death penalty. Yeah, Ethan.
Yeah, we also have to think like how severe the death penalty is,
As far as manslaughter versus intentional murder, citizens, we realize the law makes a distinction already between those things, and we might argue that they shouldn't or that they don't make enough distinction. You could go both directions on your hypothetical drunk driver or whatever, but still, even when it's unintentional, I knew when I was a little girl, there's a young man, he was probably not 25, and my mom knew him. Anyway, he ran a red light. I do not believe he was drinking or anything. He just negligently ran a red light and he killed someone. and he went to jail for 2 years. And so, the law makes a distinction when you recklessly endanger life or take life. And it is punished fairly. I mean, it was 2 years of his life, probably harrowing that he lost because he just was distracted, and he ran a red light, which could be any. A young man that my family knew when I was a little girl.
But then you also think about, you go back to it and you're like, this is still a person. Like, I know how bad the things they've done, but it's still a person that God loves. That, like, ending their life. Like,
Well, let's be honest here, please. Oh, sorry. May I add to that? There are many times in the Bible where there's a rightful death, like war. Like God would give the Israelites and God's people would just God would give them just the side of like boom.
war
You got this.
is a different situation.
I don't hold on.
No, let Ethan finish. Let him finish.
Let me finish. And there's times where God will strike people down for doing wrong.
But that's God.
I know, and it's God. We're supposed to be as just as God. Okay.
So we're supposed to kill people if we don't
I
like
just
them.
don't know.
Okay.
Hold on, let me finish.
Let Ethan finish, and then I want to step in.
I'm just saying that there's a time and a place where if somebody is causing destruction, like mass destruction, and death, something as severe as that's causing the death of other saints, other people, removing them from that situation to where they can't ever do that is ultimately saving more people. Not more about getting rid of, not more about just ending them, but more about removing them from the situation where they can hurt more people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And second thing,
Right.
God lets this rule exist. We created this at the beginning of our country, and it's lasted over these hundreds of years. And if God didn't want it there, and he thought that was unrighteous,
But like,
it wouldn't be there.
what about like North Korea? Does he think that that's unrighteous? Like whenever they kill people?
Ooh.
We don't.
That's
We don't know. We don't know with God.
Because if I feel like, I mean, God lets
We should
sin
talk about
happen,
it.
and God thinks sin is unrighteous.
No.
God thinks sin is unrighteous, and he lets it happen.
Well, North
What-
Korea is also a sinful and unrighteous.
Let me say, we have a problem here. There's a distinction between two things we're talking about. Like we were talking about, Ethan's rightful death in the Bible. There is a difference. We're talking about two things that aren't the same. Individuals taking it in their own authority to decide someone needs to go, which would be vigilantism, and the government doing it, as Kyle, and that's what Kyle was alluding to. So we have a government in place, and it says in the Bible that all governments that exist have been instituted by God. And you've got to remember, this was written under Nero. Pray for the authorities because peace in your country leads to peace for the individuals. And so, North Korea, presumably, is also a government instituted by God. What you do with the government instituted by God, then you can sin with that power, right? But I think we all always need to keep in mind that the government acting on behalf of all of us and on behalf of society that has been given the power to do that is different than, like Matthew said, well, should we go around, killing people? Because no, obviously we shouldn't, because we have not been given the authority to do that. And the problem with Ethan's argument, I think, is exactly what Matthew was pouncing on, is when you have a message from God, the golden calf episode, or the Balaam, when he tried to curse them but he didn't, and then he led it astray, and the Levites went through and they're just killing people in camp, everybody that was sinning, like, well, that God told them to. Obviously we can't do that because they were taking it upon themselves on their own authority. Okay, I want to know what Jonathan had to say.
Well, I was gonna say, it was a while ago, but Brett said, like somebody ran a red light and they healed somebody. And he said that like maybe it was somebody God loves, but I was just gonna say that God doesn't love all people, and so I was thinking like it could be a criminal. And,
But does God not love them?
well, I mean,
Or have they
God-
rejected?
God
Or have they?
loves every
Shh,
person.
shh, don't pounce on him. Has he rejected the love? Could we say? Might we say that?
Like, well, I mean, what I meant is like he loves his people especially.
And yes, I
Like,
understand.
he's created them. I mean, he's got like they're people,
Yes.
but he doesn't like.
We're not part of
He
the
cares for them, but he doesn't love them.
Okay, so you're saying, so precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his saints. It does say that. I'm sorry, but it does say that. Not is the death of everyone.
But like
And he
God-
does have special relationships with people to come in Jonathan's defense. But yes, he loves the people. But on the flip side, it is not the will of God that any should perish, but that all should have life. So he doesn't want anyone to perish in their sin.
God, when a person dies, then a dog. I mean, he's like
Yes,
in his image.
yes.
He cares about them, but he doesn't love them like he loves his own people.
Oh,
And
but
I think that might take us another hour to hash out, but I think I see where you're going with that. Sophie.
I just wanted to say, me and my mom were talking about this,
Mhm.
and she was like, should we give these people a chance to repent
Mm.
before we kill them?
That is the large argument for the anti-capital. I think that where there is life, there is hope of repentance, but removing life removes the chance for repentance. Oh, and you know what? I feel like that's a pretty strong argument. That mercy, showing mercy on the offender in hopes that they will come to know the Lord before they're gone.
Where they're like, yeah, sure, I'll say I've repented, and then they go out and commit more crimes.
Yeah, this is true. This is true. This is why this is such a hard issue. I am trying very hard to not reveal to you where I stand on capital punishment because it's not important for you to know that. It is important for us all to see there are good arguments to be made on both sides, and so to take the other side seriously. Let's not be like the people that are around us everywhere that just sort of spout their opinion. Do you know what I mean? And are just downright mean to people who don't agree with them. There's something to be said for the other side, whichever side you're on. There are good arguments, and it's hard. And so, I think last week some of you were coming in and I was telling you about G.K. Chesterton said that, when we condemn someone to death, when we condemn someone to prison, we all do it as a society. We all share in that. So if our laws are unjust, we definitely should do something about that. We should campaign to get them changed if we believe they're wrong. But there are good arguments to be made on both sides. Anyway, that's my speech. Did one of you want to say something?
I think
I
it
thought I saw a hand.
depends, like you look at how other countries in the past, whether it was Germany with the Nazis or North Korea or anybody else, will carry out their capital punishment, whereas we don't torture them. The process about I watched a video about it. It was like the first one that they put in you kind of like anesthesia, where it puts you to sleep. And the next one does this, and the next one does this, and it just is like a slow process. Like we're not like crucifying them, like it's the way we do it kind of shows what our mindset is. It's not like we're trying to make you pay and will eventually kill you. We are taking you out of the earth so that you can't harm anybody.
It's like removing someone from society.
Right. It's not you're gonna pay. You're gonna die. We're gonna remove you from society, but you're also gonna pay for it with pain and stuff. We're taking you out. So that
Yeah. Being humane about it is definitely important to people now. The reason I wrote this on the board, this is a very old movie. I just saw it last month with my husband. It's from the 50s, maybe. And it's about a case of vigilante justice. it's sort of a psychological case study in vigilante justice, and the fear that you can be worked up into when you think a murder, a wrong has been committed, and you want to see the offender punished, but it is very easy. It's a very short step. It's a very short step from that to just taking it in your own hands. And so anyway, it was a really good movie. It's totally, I mean, violence is not on screen, you know, because it's from the 40s or 50s. It's a really old movie, and there's no swearing or anything like that. But if you're interested in just a really sort of compelling drama, it moves pretty slowly. It's not car chase sort of movie. But it was a really sound movie about this topic about, okay, now I'm angry because this has been done, but I have to temper that anger with law and giving the accused a chance. And I think that maybe the idea is, you know, if we don't execute them right away, we give them a chance. Now, on the flip side, most people are on death row in our country for a long time. But repentance is possible, and that's what we have to keep in mind. I will close with this, and then we are going to move into Conquest Constitutional. No, it's totally. I know we could, and sometimes I wish I had all day with you guys. Like we would just do this for an hour, and then we go take a break and lunch, and then we'd come and talk about smart. We just do this all day, but we'd all be tired. Maybe some of you are glad we don't. But I need to tell you about our next book. Anyway, just as hope that the worst offender, God has there's mercy and grace, and it comes through us. I know a woman. Haven't been in touch with her for some time. Her daughter was stabbed to death by her boyfriend, by the daughter's boyfriend. This woman came home and found her daughter murdered by a deranged boyfriend. This happened quite some time ago, like more 25, 30 years ago now. And he was put in prison for life. Happening. You read about things like this. The woman, her husband, started visiting the man in prison, the boyfriend. And he became a Christian in prison simply because he could not believe that the parents of the woman he murdered would look him in the eye, would bring him whatever you're allowed to have in prison, food, whatever, you know, would come and talk to him. And so how we relate who have sinned or offended us personally, sometimes heinously, makes an eternal difference.
They would have killed him.
And if they had executed him, if they'd executed him immediately, he would not have had that chance. So mercy and grace extended work absolute miracles. And she actually wrote a book about this with another lady who also lost a child to violence, talking about dealing with this problem and how you deal with the loss of a child. But yeah, they, as much as it is in our power, I mean, obviously it's the Holy Spirit working through them, but they converted this man. And he will still be in prison. And I don't know, I think maybe, you know, there's parole hearing situations, and I don't know if they have ever said he should be paroled. Yeah, I don't know any of the details. It'd be very tempting then to say, this is a different man. This is a new creation in Christ, and give him a chance at life.
You just think about like someone you care about so much, which is their daughter, right?
Yeah. No, it's an amazing story, and I feel honored to have met this woman, because I feel like this is modern saint. The fact that you could do this, and I don't know that I would be so good in her position. Okay, thank you. You guys are all okay. I'm gonna let Kyle have the last word.
So, is it, is
He's
the
gonna say a
reason-
question that's like.
Okay, no, but
I
okay, just let Kyle give his thing, and then I'll let Ethan make a statement.
He wasn't put on capital punishment is because he's
That God arranged it. Well, certainly this is possible. God arranges and knows all things. So
It would be different if he was like on death row.
yeah, it was a life in prison situation, but not because I think he was high. You know what I mean? I don't think it was just like malicious. He was not. right. I'm not saying it's okay to get high and murder people. I think you understand what I'm saying. But when you're acting under the influence of a substance, it's not quite the same as you doing. Okay, Ethan, statement.
It is not. It's not the end all be all because there's also people in the system who are wrongfully convicted. There's wrongful conviction, and there's
This is true. This is true. And these are also good arguments. So anyway, this is a good start. Think about these things. You guys are just years, very, very short numbers of years from being voting citizens of our country. And I'm getting old. My country is in your hands, and the children that you guys will raise. And take it seriously. The laws of our country, we're responsible for them. And if we, one of the prophets in the Bible, he was told, if you speak up and the people don't listen and they die, it's not on you. If you don't speak up, their blood is on you. And so speak up as citizens. If you think that we have an unjust law, make your voice heard. It's hard. It feels like we don't matter. The little people don't matter, sort of, but do. Okay. You guys are amazing. This is my art that I brought in. I'm going to walk through. This is Giotto again. I think a few weeks ago, I showed some of you a Madonna by Giotto. We are entering with the fall of Constantinople. This is, by the way, this is a fresco of St. Francis preaching to the birds. I should tell you what's going on here. It's just a guy with some birds. We'd like to know what's going on. Giotto lived in about 1300. And we're getting ready to read a poem over Thanksgiving that was probably written about 1300, 1400, the Divine Comedy around the year 1300. So we're getting into the time that the Renaissance is firing up. We usually think of it being 1400, 1500, 1600, but actually as early as 1300, Giotto, this is a beautiful, very realistic painting. He did a series on St. Francis. And so just keep in mind that the literature we're moving into, things are changing. Fresh breezes are through Europe, but they're blowing earlier than you think sometimes. Art is changing, and they're starting to have interaction with the East. And every once in a while, refugees from the East show up and they know how to speak Greek and read Greek. And they start teaching people to read and speak Greek. So this is Giotto's St. Francis and the Birds. He is... Well, it kind of looks, but I think he's preaching to them. So the junior high kids, and some of you read this with me once upon a time, there's a famous story that St. Francis was preaching, to a group of people, and the birds were in a tree nearby and they were really loud. You know how, those flocks of starlings that just are deafening? If you live out in the country, you hear these. And they were being really loud. And St. Francis said, "Oh, brother birds, You've had a turn. You've talked enough. It's my turn." And that they fell silent for St. Francis. So I think he's preaching, talking to the birds. Maybe he's telling them to shut up. Or he's also, you guys probably, some of you are familiar with St. Francis and his Canticle of the Sun, where he, prays to God for brother sun and sister moon and, sister water or brother fire and all the animals. God's creation that, as the Bible says, cries out the glory of God just in its very existence. Yeah, Jesse.
It's probably metaphorical and you're probably actually creeped, but they weren't birds, they were people. And they were just really loud.
Maybe there were loud people.
I could just picture him like, come around, listen.
Okay, let's talk for a little time. We're not going to spend the whole rest of the time. I feel like the rest of this book is rather self-explanatory. There's a lot of people and places, and I told you don't get hung up. Where we're looking is for the general idea. And just tell me, in the general idea of these last chapters, did the Constantinople was under New Latin management. Did it go well for them, and did they use it well? Just kind of generally yes or generally no. Okay, they tried. It didn't go very well, did it? They seemed it seemed not to have occurred to them that when you take over a place and just start telling people what to do, and you're not really the rightful ruler, they might not want to listen to you. It just didn't really occur to them. Oh, maybe they don't want to be taken over. Maybe. No, we didn't ever think of that. I'm sorry, Ethan, did you want to say something earlier?
I mean, basically, that's just it. It didn't work. And
It didn't
people
work.
died. And it's really sad because so just like burned down land and beheaded everyone and sent the rest to slavery.
It wasn't
it's
good.
sad.
Do you
It's
guys
really
not want us
sad.
to do this?
Yeah. Isn't this okay? No, it's not okay. So, so some of the questions I asked you were to sort of lead you in that general direction. Like I said, I'm not going to go over every single thing that happened because that would be tiresome. But last week at the end, we found out that Alexius, the nephew, all right, he wasn't going to pay them. And did we? Okay, make sure that we read 8 through. Okay, so hold on. I want to see. Oh yeah, this is something you read this week, and they said, you know what? People who behave this way, people who usurp authority and put people's eyes out and don't pay their expenses, that don't keep their promise, they don't deserve. They don't deserve to have their land. I feel like this is very similar to the conversation we've just had because we're talking about somebody making a decision, you don't deserve to live anymore. What you have done is over the line and you don't deserve to live anymore. Like what the Latins are saying, and by the way, I'm just referring them as the Latins. I mean the Europeans, the Venetians, the French, everybody who's not Greek, okay? The Latins, the people who came in. They just decide to make a decision. So something else happened though in chapter 8. Do you remember, what did you write down? What happened? What happened in chapter 8 that made them say yet again, these people are beyond the pale and they do not deserve a kingdom? Do you remember?
I think it was the Greeks were just like fighting each other and being really picky and being like, they were killing each other.
Yes.
And then, who was it? It was Bob. It was like, no, y'all need to calm down. We're gonna take over now.
Mm-hmm.
You don't deserve this land.
One thing that
Yeah.
I don't like, okay, but like
Sure.
Like you deserve not to. Like,
I think that it can be taken away, but I
because
don't
like
think
you
it's
deserve
ours to
anything.
This is a point well taken. That everything we have is a blessing from God. We don't really deserve any of it. Okay, this is actually, you did read this. Do you remember the guy whose name I'm sure I'm butchering? Mortzuflus. Mortzuflus came in and he nabbed the Emperor Alexius, the young guy who had come to ask for help, and he threw him in prison. He took over and he had him strangled in prison.
It wasn't he before like, oh, you could marry my daughter.
I don't know about that, but it
was
just,
like some sort of like relationship that they're having, and then he was just like, I'm just gonna strangle you now.
it says he had been appointed to guard Alexius, is all we know. So anyway, he pops back up again in chapter 8. It says, I am not certain how many days. Okay, I need to remind you of one other thing. Remember, there's 2 Alexiuses. This makes things complicated. Young Alexius, the guy who came and begged the Crusaders for help, he's now dead, strangled in prison. Okay. Alexius, his uncle, the one who threw his brother Isaac, Alexius's dad, in prison and put out his eyes and everything. That Alexius ran away. When the why do I feel the need to act it out? Like you don't understand, ran away. You're 3 years old, ran away. And so he's out there somewhere, right? Okay, listen to this. I am not certain how many days they stayed there, one in the camp and the other inside the city. But after a while, Emperor Alexius called for the Emperor Mortzuflus to come and eat with him, saying they would go to the baths together. Thus it was planned, and so it was done. All right. The former usurper is going to get together with the newest usurper and be like, I don't know. a usurper club? I don't know, like a double duty. As he had been instructed, Emperor Mortzuflus came in secret, accompanied by just a few men. When he had entered the house, Emperor Alexius called him into a chamber where he threw him on the floor and put the eyes out of his head. I don't know what they have with the putting out of eyes thing. Such as you have heard it was his treachery. Now, consider, says Geoffrey, consider whether such people as this, who commit such atrocities against each other, should keep their lands or lose them. That's a good question, Geoffrey. I don't know. I don't know if I feel qualified to just give people's lands away, but that's pretty dirty and low. So Mortzuflus is now blind. Alexius, the first usurper, is still, yeah. I know. Mortzuflus. Mort. We just call him Mort. Intense debate. It was firmly declared that men who so wickedly betrayed each other had no right to hold their lands. Now, if you feel like you want justice, if you'd like to know what happens to Mort, if you remember, it so happened during this time that the blinded Emperor Mortzuflus, who had murdered his lord, Emperor Alexius, who was the son of Emperor Isaac and had been brought to this land by the pilgrims, fled unnoticed across the straits with just a few men. Dietrich of Lutz discovered this when Mortzuflus's hiding place was betrayed to him and captured him and took him to Emperor Baldwin in Constantinople. Emperor Baldwin was delighted at this and took advice from his men as to what he should do with a man who had committed such a treachery against his own lord. We have treason. The council agreed on the following punishment. There was a column in the center of the city of Constantinople, one of the highest and most intricately sculpted marble ever laid eyes on. They would have him taken to the top and make him jump from it. In front of all the people. I don't know. This is a really good question. Helicopter? Hoist him up on a rope? I don't know. This is full of questions. Since it was right that everyone should see high justice being done. And so Emperor Mortzuflus was led to the column and taken to the top, and all the people of the city flocked to see such a remarkable sight. He was pushed off, and he fell from such a height that when he hit the ground, his body shattered completely. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Okay, you know what? Like that's a crowd pleaser right there. That goes after. I knew it would be too. And then they captured Alexius and sent him to prison. So all the bad guys have been okay. I'm gonna let Matthias go first. I don't know. Oh, but then the story goes on. I won't read all of this. It says, this is very intriguing to me. So now, Matthias, I want to see the poll because it says, oh, will I not find it? Hang on. Okay, hang on, because it's worth it. Oh, do you remember what I'm talking? Okay, say it, Jonathan. Listen to Jonathan.
So basically, it said there was inscribed on the pole was like a little picture of a man falling off a tower, among others. And so they thought it was a prophecy.
This is very interesting to me. I can't find it now, but Jonathan is my witness that it's in there somewhere. Okay, Rhett, what were you going to say?
I think it would have been better if they would have I'm trying to think about it. I think it was whole being maybe a foot and a half in diameter, something like that, maybe 2 feet, but just had him stand up there
Forever.
until he got tired.
You're even meaner. You're even meaner than they are. Because now he dies and his body shatters, but he's also exhausted and starving. No, Rhett should never be in charge of punishment. Don't let Rhett decide punishments. He makes them worse. Oh yeah, he's blind. He's blind too. I forgot about the blind part. Oh my gosh. Oh no, this is getting worse and worse.
It's like bungee jumping with a blindfold. Just cut the rope. That's so bad.
Okay. I have lost complete control in here. We're going to be, somebody's going to come in and chastise us again for not being a good enough class.
Right. Well, I think
That's
if it's-
horrifying.
If it's that tall, it's probably gonna be like 3 or 4 feet.
It like
It's supposed to line.
Yes.
Imagine like walking. Or, like,
No. But I want to know whose job it was to go up there and stand with him and push him. Like, no. What if he grabs you on the way down? Okay, we've talked about this enough. We've just, oh dear. Okay. Well, we've way talked about that long enough. So all of the threats, well, okay, I was about to say something not true. All of the threats we've met so far are disposed of. So young Alexius has been strangled. Old Alexius is in prison. Murtzuphlus, Isaac died a long time ago. Murtzuphlus has been off the tower. And so they don't have anybody they're dealing with currently for the moment, but now they've got to deal with some other problems. But I'm going to let Karsten chime in. It's
massive. Muslim spot? Not.
no, exactly. And it's not going to change. Basically, debt increases. Muslim spot. This is going to stay that way. Now, the next question I asked you in chapter 8, there's another problem that almost created disaster. Did anybody find what I was thinking of? There are two problems. The junior high kids, and I just talked about this. There are two problems that a kingdom or a group of people can have. One of them, somebody attacks you from outside. So Murtzuphlus or whatever. What's the other one? Civil war. The leaders, remember, we elected a ruler, right? We elected a new emperor, Baldwin. The Marquis Boniface of Montferrat, who was Geoffrey's, liege lord, he got Salonika. I think this is Thessalonica. All right, but they call it Salonika. He got that land over in northern Greece. And here that apparently Baldwin wants to go with him to Salonika, and the Marquis Boniface says, no, I can deal with it myself. And Baldwin says, well, I'm going. And he says, well, you gave me that land. Well, I'm going. And Boniface says, oh, yeah, well, I'm going somewhere else, and I'm going to start attacking cities that belong to you. Oh, yeah. Emperor Baldwin of Constantinople and Marquis Boniface of Montferrat parted on bad terms and on bad advice. Later, it says they sent word to Constantinople that the emperor and the Marquis had fallen out with each other, that the Marquis had seized Demotica, one of the richest castles in Romania, as well, one of the strongest castles in Romania, as well as one of the richest, and had laid siege to Adrianople, which belonged to Baldwin. They're now attacking each other like they don't have enough problems. They're going to attack each other, iron things out, but
After 15 cities for sure.
yeah, after disaster, yes, Rhett.
I can only think of him being like a little short guy. I'm going with you. He's like a big muscular. He's like, no, kid, you're not. He's like, no, just let me go. Let me go. And he's
Yeah,
like,
no.
No.
So I actually brought my map. You had a map in your book, and but just so okay, here we go. Constantinople is here. I can see through the map. This is very convenient. Okay, Constantinople is here, and there's two areas of fighting. Right? They go across here, and the map in your book there's a close up of just this area right here. There, Adrianople is over here. Salonika is over here. So this whole area is what's in play. But they also met a problem over here. They were fortifying across the strait. And there was a guy, I'm going to read about this in a minute, Theodore Lascaris. He's the rightful ruler now. He's the next in line. And so what happens, just to sum up the entire what you read, they start by trying to rule all of this area, and it just keeps shrinking because they keep being attacked by Greeks, local Greeks. Theodore Lascaris is taking over and he's attacking. So they say, okay, let's shrink. Let's all gather here. And then this area is falling to, local Greece. Like, oh, we're shrinking it. And then the other problem they had was a guy named Johanitsa. He's the king of Bulgaria. He's from up here. And of course, if you have a really prosperous land to your south or your neighbor, and they're falling into complete disunity, they've been taken over, and the new rulers are ditzes, what is your next move? Get it by all means, get it. And this is what Joanitsa does. So much of what you read involved this guy just coming down and attacking these cities over and over and over. The Greeks are stuck. The Greeks don't love Joanitsa. They don't love Emperor Baldwin either. And this is the next question I believe I asked you. What made the Greeks hate their new Latin rulers? Jeffrey's very partisan. He's Latin, but he lets some things slip occasionally that everything is not well. Does anybody have an answer for that? Why do they not just love them? I would think they've got to be better than Alexius and Isaac and the other Alexius and Murtzuphlus. The very beginning of chapter 9, Jeffrey says this: once each man had been assigned his lands, worldly greed, which has been the cause of so much wickedness, allowed them no peace. They all began to exploit their lands unjustly, some more, others less, and the Greeks began to despise them, bear them ill will towards them in their hearts. This is another moral you can learn. If you ever take over a country, be nice to the people you just took over. Do not oppress them. Although next year we're reading, was it this year? We're reading Machiavelli's The Prince.
No, that's this year.
That's this year. So he would have a different answer to you, what you should do. He'd have a couple of options, one of which is be super nice, but he'd vote for the other one, which is murder all dissenters immediately in one swift stroke. They did not do that. And so I took note of a couple of other places where this issue comes up. It says, the Emperor Baldwin's brother Henry left Constantinople and crossed the straits. He found a city well stocked with all good things. He seized the city for himself and found lodgings inside it before starting to make war on the Greeks in the surrounding territory. They're just continuing the conquest. The Greeks aren't just going to sit down and take it. Then we meet the land on the other side of the straits was controlled by a Greek lord named Theodore Lascaris, who claimed it by right of his wife. His wife was in the ruling family. He's the legitimate ruler. A little later on, Jeffrey says that they were outside a town, Chorlu. The Latins were outside the town of Chorlu, and they were trying to talk to the Greeks inside and get them to surrender. Listen to what they did. As our men were preparing for their assault, the people of the town offered to surrender. But while negotiations were being conducted on one side of the town, some members of our army broke into it on the other side. They're undergoing peace negotiations on one side of the city while half their troops break in from the back. Henry, the regent of the empire, and those who were discussing the surrender did not know anything about it, and they were deeply angered. The Franks began to kill the Greeks and to seize goods in the town, taking anything they could. Many people were killed or captured in the middle of a peace negotiation. I mean, is it any wonder that these Greeks are looking around for another ally? Yes.
This is kind of like what happened with the U.S. and Japan when Japan had their surrender or whatever on their way to the U.S.
Oh.
It wasn't like they didn't email it, like it was being sent
Yes,
over.
physically.
And while that was being sent over, we dropped like the second bomb. And so it's kind of like similar.
Mhm.
Because I assumed that they weren't just attacking them while the peace treaties were going on just to beat them up.
No, no.
That they were like,
And we don't know if the guys in the back of the town knew that they were actively negotiating. They just, oh, we can break in. We're trying to take the city anyway. Innocent mistakes do happen in war, but in this case, it's debatable whether they should have been trying to take the town in the first place. Matthew.
I thought Brad was gonna say something else. There was like, in World War II at the beginning, it was like there was a representative in Washington D.C. from Japan talking to them about like peace terms or just like negotiating stuff while the bombing on Pearl Harbor happened.
I remember I've heard of this before. Maybe you told me. I feel like I saw this in a movie once. There was a movie about this.
and it was just a miscommunication.
Yeah, he had no idea, and they had to he said he didn't know, so they escorted him back basically.
Mm-hmm.
Dang, I'm surprised he didn't get killed.
Yeah, yeah.
We want to talk about treason.
So this was kind of maybe a hard question to follow. This is in chapter 10. I said, what is Geoffrey's opinion of the Greeks trying to get rid of the Franks? Okay, maybe you just remember enough. Like, does Geoffrey think that was a bad thing for them to fight back, or that was a good thing for them to fight back? What would you guess Geoffrey would say? Should the Greeks fight against them, or should the Greeks just give up?
Jeffrey's whole thing was like, the Greeks kind of got handed to them anyways. Like they kind of like just let the Franks kind of do it, because Jeffrey was already like from the start like, oh, these Greeks are evil. Like they don't deserve their land in the first place.
Yeah. So is he going to react well to any of them trying to fight against the Latins for their freedom? No, he's not. He says this at the beginning of chapter 10. The Greeks, who were so deceitful, had not rid their hearts of treachery. By the time they could see that the French had gone their separate ways throughout the land, and that each had his own affairs to attend to, the Greeks thought that now they would be able to betray them. In secret, Greek envoys were appointed in each and every city in the land and sent to Johanitsa, king of Bulgaria, a man who had made war on them in the past and was doing so even then. The envoys told the king they would make him emperor and surrender to him, and they would kill all the Franks. So Geoffrey's the Greeks turned against the men in the castle that they were supposed to be defending. Geoffrey's appalled. But me as a reader, I'm like, buddy, you took over their land. People who have been conquered tend to fight back. It doesn't make them treacherous. It makes them, yes. But they had said that they would obey the Latins. I think it's very, I don't know, I feel like it's a little naive to think that a conquered people, oh, we will obey you. As soon as you leave, they're not going to obey you. They don't want to obey you. They're just doing it out of duress,
Is that more treacherous than not knowing about peace terms and fighting from the back? I mean, if that's treachery,
Yeah.
what
See,
says that the other one is
yes.
just as treacherous.
See, so notice, and I feel like I'm painting Geoffrey in a little bit of a bad light, but it's good for us to know when we read a historian, where are they from? What's their perspective? And from Geoffrey's perspective, that was a sad misunderstanding. You see, but when the Greeks do it, they're treacherous and deceitful, always. And I don't know if you know this, Greek, partly it's from this, but the Greeks have never stopped having a reputation for treachery. It's the famous line in the Aeneid when Laocoon, remember the priest Laocoon and the Trojan horse, and he throws a spear into the side of the horse, and he says, this horse has got some treachery in it. You don't want to deal with this horse. And he said, I fear Greeks even when they're bearing gifts. This is the famous line. I fear Greeks even when they're bearing gifts. And so this idea, the Greeks will stab you in the back. The Greeks are all Odysseus. It was sort of a Western thing. Well, this is true. It certainly doesn't seem fair in this case, but notice this point of view. Oh, that's unfortunate that we broke into the back of the city and killed a bunch of people while we were negotiating. But those Greeks, oh my goodness, they're always being treacherous. Yeah, Rhett, what did you want to say?
How much time between like them being conquered and then fighting back?
This is in the first couple of years. This is all happening within a couple of years.
Yeah, so like one, I was thinking if it was like 1 year or something like
Yeah.
that, which like in the whole scheme of time, it really isn't that much. But like you think about like maybe they were obeying the laws and being good citizens.
Mhm.
It's like I'm just trying to give Jeffrey a little bit like benefit of the doubt because I feel like a ruler would be like being in that time and knowing how much like how often war was because like war cost you a lot back then, but
Mhm.
kind of not what it would now.
Mm-hmm.
Like countries would just go attack people, and it wasn't as crazy as like if somebody attacks somebody now, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I'm sure that because I don't think he was just like, oh, well, just listen to us, just because like he knew that people would fight. So I wonder if they indicated something that like they weren't just like that the whole time in this build over. Like they were probably abiding by the laws, being good citizens. There weren't many troubles or anything. And then this was such a surprise to him because of their actions.
Do you mean they had been docile and obedient after the takeover or before?
Yeah.
Okay.
After.
I don't know that there ever was enough time, Rhett, for them to really settle down and that it was just almost immediate that they were going out and trying to take over and they just never really accepted it.
So then he
Yeah. Well, but no more than we all are.
Yeah.
Because we all have our own perspective, we see it from our own way. Yeah, Ethan, what did you want to say?
Yeah, that's actually what I was going to say. Because Jeffrey, his perspective is from the perspective that anyone in the place he lives at that time would probably think.
Mhm.
Because
Absolutely.
his people.
No, there's nothing different about Jeffrey. And so this comment sheds light on this idea. So he's talking about some people, they're over across the straits. I'm not getting my map out again. Okay. The people from the region around Cyzicus and from Marmara rebelled against Peter of Bracieux, their rightful lord, and inflicted great harm on him, killing a good number of his men. Their rightful lord is now a Frank. But Jeffrey, is it? Is it? You just took over. You took over another Christian nation because they didn't pay you. And because you judge that they aren't worthy of their lands because they're too wicked. And it's in a nutshell, that's what happened here. And so I think it's really interesting that he refers to this Frankish lord, Peter, as their rightful lord. And the Greeks rebelled against their rightful lord. Well, it depends on who you ask, doesn't it? So this whole thing, I hope you're getting the message that this whole crusade, this whole event in history is highly troubling. Oh yeah, the whole thing is a disaster that are only going to last 60 or 70 years, just to let you know. And then they're going to invite the Greeks back in to take over. I asked you, did you notice a phrase that Jeffrey uses a lot? What does he say a lot about events?
And God ordained it. God is in control here. Even when something bad happens, alas, but God is still in control. Like,
which is true.
Which is true.
He's really dramatic.
He is. I have on one page, since events transpire according to God's will, and then events unfold as God wants them to. I have, well, yeah.
God doesn't want like God allows.
Well, it depends on what we're perhaps equivocating on the word wants or will. There might be God's sovereign will in which all is worked out and according to his plan, but then there is his individual will for each person. It's never his will that we sin, but the sin, it's not his will that Pharaoh refused to let the people go, but it is his larger will that Pharaoh not let the people go.
Right.
because his glory will be shown. And so there's like a double, we use God's will and we use it in more than one sense, if you know what I mean. Hmm.
That like you think about like that, a lot of that couldn't have happened unless this person did.
Yes,
And
yes.
so like it wasn't God's will for them to do that, but in the long run, it was God's.
It is God's
I'm not
larger,
saying that
his
God-
sovereign will.
God wouldn't have come because this person didn't do this, like didn't do this certain thing. It's not like because Jesus was born like of the Virgin Mary,
Hmm.
not like, you know what I'm saying?
Yes, that if someone had rejected, but for
Right.
example, if Moses had said no,
Yeah.
because he tried, you know. I don't speak well. I'm not a good public speaker. Oh Lord, send somebody else, you know. But does that mean the people would still be slaves in Egypt? No, I don't believe. And when Jesus said, you know, that even the stones, if you don't let the children cry, even the stones will cry out. Praise. So point well taken, but we're often talking about a couple of things. But he says, even in this case, since God permits bad things to happen, like Ethan said, even when things don't go well, he does. I got to give Jeffrey his props in this case. He gives all authority and glory to God, even when things go bad. Even if I think they are making decisions that seem abusive of other people and sinful. All right. He, like, you know what? God works things out, even when we're all slaughtered by Johanitza or whatever. God works things out. God's in charge here. We may sit in this room in judgment on Jeffrey, that I suppose we have small right, but not huge right, and judge that, you know, they were all wrong. But he was honestly believing that God was in charge and they were doing God's will and that God had placed that city into their hands. So this is the trick of history, right? As a person today, living today, I think, Jeffrey, no, you guys can't do that. But then putting myself in his shoes, I think, okay, the rulers were acting wickedly and they didn't keep their promises, and you already had a prejudice against the Greeks going into this, and you're just human beings, and I get it. And so I think maybe if we could do that a little more, we'd be less up in arms about things people did in history. You know, if we stop and say, okay, sitting here in my cozy room, it's easy for me to say, oh, you guys were very wrong. You were just very wrong. You acted wrong. But then if you try to put yourself in their position and what the world was like, and what the expectation, well, okay, you know what? Someday, if Jesus doesn't return again for a good number of years, somebody's someday going to be looking back at us. And they're going to say, what were they thinking? What? They did what? They said what? And I may not even know what that thing is because I'm so used to it. And Jeffrey was so used to it. Look, this is what you do. You know, like you just attack. You take over the kingdom. That's what you do. This is the way it works. Exactly. So Johanitza, I got to point out, I'm going to kind of rush to the end because I have some words to say about what we're doing next. There's several times when he's described as acting treacherously. Numerous times he took a city, you know, because the Greeks said, we want to be allies with you. And then he's not very nice. And then they later think, oh, maybe we picked a bad ally. You know, so he's taking cities, Greek cities, and he cuts them a deal. It's like, you know what? You can all just come out of the city. It's fine. I will spare you. Here's one of them. In each instance, when a certain castle or city was surrendered after having received assurances from him, he had it destroyed and took its men and women prisoner. He did not keep any of the promises he made. Here it says, after telling them that if they surrendered, he would keep them safe, he first of all killed the city's archbishop, then had some of the high-ranking men of the city flayed alive, while others had their heads cut off.
Can you explain, like, what is the lane like
Apparently, not fillet, flay. It's I do not want to think too hard about how this happens, but it's removing the skin from the body, removing your skin. Apparently, if you can do it well, and I don't want any of us to ever learn.
Do they like?
I mean, it's like skinning an animal. Like you'd skin a rabbit or something, only it's doing it to a human being. Skinning you.
While they're alive.
Yeah.
While they're
And you don't stay alive, maybe till the end. But if you can, because we all know, skin is attached to the muscles beneath, and because have we done chicken? Like, there's like membranes that, and you get the skin off the chicken, and you can just kind of cut away the little bit that holds it on. Let's not think about that anymore. That's just, and now I've just ruined everybody's Thanksgiving. You're all going to try to skin the turkey and experiment with it. Anyway, the reason I bring this up, and this was my last question, what does Jeffrey think of Johannitsa's character? He's the biggest, fattest traitor of them all. And listen to what Jeffrey is saying. Traitors are barbarians. Johannitsa is the traitor par excellence here. He literally tells people, I will keep you all safe if you surrender, and then has them tortured and murdered. And then takes the rest into slavery. And so this is hard for us because it's important to Jeffrey, but it's not as important to us because now we've kind of felt like we're down on the Latins a little bit. Do you remember how many times in the early book he talked about disloyalty? And they didn't go to Venice. And they got on a different ship. And they wanted the army to disband. And they started fighting. Disloyalty. When you turn on people and you don't keep your promises, like Alexius did, like Johannitsa did, you're a barbarian. And Franks, we are better than that. We acted a little bit like that. But we are better than that. We should be better than that. Does that make sense to you guys? I think that's why he brings this up. I mean, he's just telling a cool story. He's telling the story of what happened. But I think he has a point. He's not just randomly choosing events to put in his history. Johannitsa and Alexius are important because they are traitors. They are renegers on their promises. Don't be like that, Franks. So he leaves at the end. He ends, actually, did you notice, with the death of the Marquis Boniface of Montferrat, the guy who is Geoffrey's lord, the guy who married his daughter to Emperor Henry because Baldwin got kidnapped and killed. And it looks like there's going to be peace. There's unity. Marquis is not arguing with Baldwin's family anymore. They've got a child in common because the emperor's wife was pregnant. It's going to be Marquis's grandchild, and then he dies. And Geoffrey stops here. Alas, what a grievous misfortune it was for Emperor Henry and all the Latins in the land of Romania to lose such a man as this as a result of such bad luck. He had been one of the best and most generous barons, and one of the finest knights there was in all the world. This most unhappy accident occurred in the year of the incarnation of Jesus Christ, 1207. 3 years after the takeover. Now, imagine you are living in France, all right? And Geoffrey writes this down and it becomes circulated. There's copies, handwritten, so you get a hold of this. How do you feel? You've just read this. Oh, we've captured the most amazing land, but the Marquis is dead. They're finally unified, but their lands, their holdings are shrinking. What might you be tempted to do? You are a French knight. What? Go help him. Go help him. I wonder if Geoffrey's writing a call for help. Look, we are surrounded by traitors. We are surrounded by treachery. We are death on every side. Our best men are dying. Come help us. It didn't work. Some people did go, but they couldn't hold it. They couldn't. It was about all the actual legitimate emperors of Constantinople could do to hold all that land, and it was already shrinking. They weren't going to hold it. This is an ugly blot on history for the Western side. Like I told you, the two halves of the church, when they look at each other, it's like, yeah, you're the guys who came and killed our people and destroyed our city. The Orthodox are not real pleased with this historical point, and they shouldn't be.
Is it still a affect Islam? Is there still, because of this, there's
In some circles, I mean, they were already split. They had already split, but yeah, people will mention this. People who grow up Orthodox, people in Greece, people in those what Eastern European countries that are Orthodox say, yeah, we remember, we know what Europeans are like. Yeah, even though it was 800 years ago. Yeah, we know the story. Yeah, I don't know that it keeps them. There are other things that keep the churches from rejoining, but I don't know that that's the key thing. But it gets brought up. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to do Matthew first, and then Ethan.
I feel like it's kind of off topic a little bit, but I remember when we were reading Charlemagne and stuff, they were talking about how like Charlemagne let the Greeks keep their land
Yes.
when it was obvious that the Greeks were much more powerful than them. And so like the Western Rome or like the Western Europeans were like the little brother almost, and then they grew up and then they went and took it.
Yeah, they went up and took it and beat up on their brother. Yeah. Okay. Well, it's a weird story. The whole thing is a weird story, and it almost sounds made up, but it really happened. The Fourth Crusade, that was not a crusade, that attacked two Christian cities. Weird. Yes. Over Christmas, not Christmas. Whatever. What holiday is this? Thanksgiving. As promised, I'm not asking you to write anything. I am traveling. Some of you may be traveling, and don't write. I'm going to El Paso, Texas, to visit my son, who's been out in the desert shooting off tanks at each other, and apparently watching missile launches at White Sands. And I don't have time to go into this, but UFOs over the New Mexico desert in the last month. Anyway, twice, and then no pictures, and twice apparently immediately followed by fighter jets that seem to be following the UFOs. I know. Okay, you can ask me about this some other time when we have time. We are going to read another poem. Oh, see, I can't please everybody. You can't please everybody. Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. Some of you know this story already because you read it with me when you were in junior high, perhaps. This particular one I had you get, and it's okay if you got another version, but I like that Tolkien translated this one. Do you remember Beowulf? And Beowulf had alliteration, right? Do you remember this? That words alliterated, didn't rhyme or anything. So in about the year 1400, there were two guys. One of them we know the name of very well, Geoffrey Chaucer. One of them, we have no idea what his name is, the author of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. And there were two competing poetic schools, okay? So Chaucer, it's like, oh, I dig this French new thing where the lines rhyme in couplets and they have this meter. Love it. The Gawain poet said, you know what? That's just bosh. We should go back to good old-fashioned Anglo-Saxon alliterative poetry. We should alliterate. That's where it's at. And of course, Chaucer won. We now, in the years after 1500s, 1600s, most poetry was rhyming couplets, this sort of thing, and alliteration sort of fell by the wayside. So each stanza of Gawain, it has a lot of alliteration, and then at the end of each one, it has a couple of words, and then a 4-line rhyming thing. And it's called, I love this, it's called the Bob and the Wheel. I just like to say it. It's the Bob and the Wheel. So the little line and then is the wheel. So I'm going to read the first stanza and just so you can hear the Bob and the Wheel at the end. I'll like act out the Bob and the Wheel. When I get it. Okay. And listen, when I notice it, I will highly alliterate, When the siege and the assault had ceased at Troy, and the fortress fell in flame to firebrands and ashes. The traitor who the contrivance of treason there fashioned was tried for his treachery, the most true upon earth. It was Aeneas the noble and his renowned kindred, who then laid under them lands. That's okay. And lords became of well nigh all the wealth in the Western Isles. When royal Romulus to Rome his road had taken, in great pomp and pride he peopled it first, and named it with his own name that yet now it bears. Tyrius went to Tuscany and towns founded, Langobard and Lombardy uplifted halls, and far over the French flood Felix Brutus, on many a broad bank and brae, Britain established full fair, where strange things strife and sadness at whiles in the land did fare, and each other grief and gladness off fast have followed there. The bob and the wheel. And that's how each one goes. It's all this alliteration, then da-da. Da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. You hear it. Okay, so notice where it starts. Troy. Everything starts in Troy. Everything starts in Troy. Every story starts in Troy. And the fact that, of course, Aeneas fled and founded Rome, eventually through Romulus and Remus. Well, Romulus at least. And then Brutus. Well, I'm sorry. It's true. Remus is dead. And then Brutus goes from Rome and he goes to Britain. That's why Britain is Britain. So even the British think they're Roman. Everybody's Roman. Well, no, Trojan. I mean, yeah, okay. So I don't know what to say to that. Okay, I'm going to read one more. And when fair Britain was founded by this famous lord, bold men were bred there who in battle rejoiced, and many a time that betid they troubles aroused. In this domain more marvels have by men been seen than in any other that I know of since that olden time. But of all that here abode in Britain as kings, ever was Arthur most honored, as I have heard men tell. Wherefore a marvel among men I mean to recall, a sight strange to see some men have held it, one of the wildest adventures of the wonders of Arthur. If you will listen to this lay but a little while now, I will tell it at once, as in town I have heard it told, as it is fixed and fettered in story brave and bold, thus linked and truly lettered, as was loved in the land of old. All right. Because it's the bob. It's the bob and the wheel. All right. So it sets the stage for you. This is a story of one of King Arthur's knights, Sir Gawain, and something that happened. And I am going to issue a challenge to Karsten. Like, what? What? Okay. So you guys say things sometimes and you don't know it, but I think about it for a long time. And here's what Karsten said. Just because it's set at Christmas time doesn't mean it's a Christmas story. I am going to push back on that a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to leave you with this because I have to let you go. Here's my pushback. I'm going to challenge you to see why this story may be set at Christmas, and if the setting at Christmas is an integral part of the happenings. Keep in mind, authors do not randomly choose settings. And settings reveal to us something about what the author wants to say. So as we're approaching Christmas, now I'm not saying that somebody doesn't just like Christmas and set it at Christmas. I'm pushing back on you a little bit. So here's your job. Think about the setting. Watch for settings. The individual settings, the time it is, and see if you can get a peek. He could have said it at any time. And he said it at Christmas and New Year's. And I want to know if you can figure out what Christmas and New Year's might have to do with the story, okay? And maybe you'll say, nothing, Mrs. Ferguson. You are leading us on a wild goose chase. This might be your answer. But, okay. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Thank you. I will see you in 2 weeks.